The sizzle of a patty, the ooze of a dumpling, and the crunch of fried chicken. But looks can be deceiving, because everything you've just seen is not meat.
It looks like normal meat texture.
They really look similar.
I mean, it tastes like meat.
Now I'm not sure anymore.
Which one's not meat? This one's not meat? So this one's actually meat? Oh, wow.
Meatless meats are on a meteoric rise and is projected to become a US $1.5 billion industry by 2022. This wave of change in the way we eat is only made possible through visionaries like Quorn, pioneer of plant-based foods. And more recently, those who've dared to be different. Impossible Foods, serving up a never-before-seen product, a burger that bleeds. And it has a big mission.
The only way we can change that system is to produce products that can outcompete and outperform an animal.
You never get a second chance. Whatever you launch first, it's a do or die.
Quorn was able to discover something that would not only be a good protein, but would also be a positive impact on the planet.
I was trying to put the concept across to influential leaders. It was very tough. We're just way ahead of the game.
Abundant protein-rich meat will keep our nation strong.
It is a very inefficient and very dirty system.
Beef, lamb, and pork.
Mad cow disease.
COVID-19.
The world is in dire need of a solution.
The evolution of food.
This is the plant-based burger that took the world's appetite by storm. This dietary savior has entered 5 markets in just 4 years. They've conjured a burger that feels and tastes like the real deal. And it bleeds.
This was the first time you could try a product that just sort of tasted like it was the language of meat. It wasn't the language of things that came from plants.
Henry Woodward is responsible for putting these bad boys in front of F&B players worldwide. And his company, Impossible Foods, wants to take a bite out of the age-old meat-making industry. And for good reason. The world's appetite for meat is becoming too insatiable. Asia accounts for almost half of the world's meat consumption and is in danger of eating its way to an environmental disaster. According to the Singapore Food Agency, the island state, as one of the smallest cities in Asia, sees an average person eat 62 kilos of meat per capita per year. That's more than the average person in Malaysia, Japan, Philippines, or Thailand. But why is it that we crave meat so much?
I like the fats. We will die without meat.
For like 10,000 years, we've been doing pretty amazing things to pieces of meat.
Especially being French, red meat is at the center of the French cuisine.
Probably fried chicken from KFC and like the sweet and sour pork, because it tastes nice.
One thing is clear. We love meat. And this habit goes back 2.5 million years ago.
At the very beginning, we're not hunters, we're scavengers for a very long time. So we would basically eat what was left over.
Marta Zaraska, author of Meat Hooked, spent 2 years obsessing over why we eat meat at all.
The climate has changed in Central Africa. It became drier, and the foods that our ancestors were relying on became less available. What became more available were animals. And they discovered that the food really filled up the stomachs. So what some scientists say is meat made us human. Our brains take about 25% of our body's resting calories. That's a huge amount. For example, other mammals, such as cats or dogs, for them it's 3 to 5%. Our brains are real energy guzzlers. And for that, we needed a very high quality diet that would be easier to digest, more loaded with calories, and meat was that.
During the days of royalty, meat was an exclusive dish afforded to only the wealthy, with the king having dominion over all land and animals.
There is something called the scarcity principle. Humans crave things more when they are not easy to obtain.
To the Allied nations, food is a weapon of freedom. Here is the answer to fascism.
Even Second World War, meat was rationed.
The civilian ration of bacon in Britain is 4 ounces per person per week.
And when I was a child, I grew up in communist Poland. I used to stand with my mother for hours in lines to get a small piece of meat.
Post-World War II, meat made a comeback, with mass marketing campaigns encouraging the consumption of meat, that it was delicious and nutritious.
Meat is good for you.
The 1960s, a time of great change, great song. And when it came to food in the West, it had to be meat.
Abundant protein-rich meat contributes to the well-being and strength of our people and our country.
But there were fears that we had bitten off more protein than we could chew because of this book.
1968, a best-selling book, literally exploded into the public consciousness. The premise was that the world's growing population would quickly exceed our food production capabilities and cause mass starvation throughout the world.
It was this that drove a trailblazing Brit to look for a solution. An alternative protein that had the potential to eliminate food shortage and widespread famine.
I think it's a beautiful place to start for me because, look, I'm actually from that period.
This is Marco Bertacca, CEO for Quorn, who aims to be just as visionary as the company's founder, Lord Rank.
Lord Rank started to address a future problem because he was able to discover something that would not only be a good protein, but would also be an incredible fit for an environmental question.
Lord Rank scoured the world for an alternative. He had no experience in the field, but he was driven by a mission to find a microorganism that was nutritious and that could feed the world. During a 5-year worldwide search, they tested over 3,000 organisms from soil samples from the UK to Chile to India. He was to be the pioneer in plant-based proteins.
First mover advantage has huge upsides because you can build knowledge about the industry, you can understand and build a consumer base way before your competitors can interfere.
This is Lawrence Kohler, a business expert with 20 years of experience in marketing and branding strategy.
In the food industry, where regulation is so big, it can also be quite challenging. In the food industry in particular, you cannot afford to have it not right. I mean, it's a do or die at the end of the day.
It was a rigorous process to find the IT protein. The organism needed to be safe, nutritious, scalable, and have a low carbon footprint. Ironically, they found their answer right in their backyard in Buckinghamshire, England, and they called it mycoprotein.
We call it mycoprotein because it's high in proteins and it's derived from fungus, and the Latin word of fungus is myco.
Andy Kasumo is the first scientist Quorn hired in Asia. Similar to the process of making beer or wine, mycoprotein requires the process of fermentation. But instead of straining it for the liquid, Quorn keeps the dough like fungi.
This is actually the biomass of the fungus. The fungus has a morphology that looks like meat in terms of the fibrosity and fibers. When we tear it, you see that it has this meat-like texture. This is the natural textures of the mycoprotein itself.
The cell structure of mycoprotein is almost exactly like the cell structure of meat, a meat replacement with a meaty texture. This is Quorn's holy grail, and like chicken, it can go with almost anything.
From a science perspective, I look at 3 things: texture, taste, and what I call mouthful. A little bit bouncy, a little bit starchy, and obviously the flavor that goes with it. This is what I call a marriage between science and art.
So it's about creating the right chemistry in one's mouth. But psychologically, there's a lot more to it than just texture.
You have fat, so this is the texture, which suggests to our bodies that there is lots of calories in the food. Then there is so-called umami taste, which signifies the presence of proteins in the food. Then there is the salty flavor. Also, salt is hard to find in nature, so there is, again, something that we really crave. And then the Maillard reaction. Maillard reaction is something that happens when you, for example, grill a piece of meat and this kind of browning happens on the surface. They signified exactly to our ancestors that it was full of calories, full of protein.
It takes a lot to satisfy our prehistoric palate. But fast forward to today, what we love about meat is possible to find in plant-based foods. And we've never needed a better solution more.
It's a very simple calculation. There's just not enough land to grow enough animals, to consume animals the way that our world population currently wants. Meat is extremely inefficient. If you're going to eat a chicken, you first obviously have to grow the chicken. And to grow the chicken, you need food to feed the chicken. For every calorie that you get out of a chicken, you need 9 calories to go in. That is pretty inefficient, and actually a chicken is the most efficient animal that we eat.
Our world is going through a human-induced global warming. According to NASA, 2019 was one of the warmest years of the history of the planet, with livestock being one of the largest contributors, greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, added water stress. And that's what drove Stanford biochemist Pat Brown to create Impossible Foods.
If we could just invent a more sustainable way to turn plants into delicious, affordable meats that uncompromising meat consumers actually prefer to what they get today from animals.
The revolutionary plant-based foods company of the millennium. The first order, building his dream team. The first hire being Nick Hala.
So I've been in the beef and dairy farming world most of my life. And your job as a farmer is to produce really good food affordably for masses, while maintaining your land. I had never realized before, because we do feed animals a lot of food for what we eat out of them. So it is a very inefficient and a very dirty system because of the demand of that system, and we have to change that paradigm.
This paradigm that Pat and Nick set out to shift is a US $1.4 trillion meat industry. It's an industry that's pretty much as old as time itself. But unfazed, Impossible's mission is to remove all animal products from the food industry by 2035.
That was the mandate. We need to recreate food. That's a huge mandate, and it's really hard to execute on something that big of a vision.
To win the hearts and minds, and most importantly, stomachs of discerning consumers, Impossible needed to produce a meat that pushes the boundaries in sight, smell, texture, and taste. But with no business model to follow or food science know-how to learn from, how did Impossible become such a worldwide phenomenon? This is what we want to believe our world will always be. This is what we don't want to see. This, not this. But if there's anything 2020 has taught us, is that we cannot afford to look away.
We reported the largest number of COVID-19 positive tests.
China has reported 72,528 cases.
It's been a nightmare. We have a volume of sick people like you can't believe.
They have tested different places in the market, and so they have found indeed the coronavirus that is now responsible of this epidemic in humans.
To reduce pollution and pandemics drastically, Henry Woodward from Impossible Foods believes we need to take a hard look at the way we eat.
I mean, we've been burning the candle at multiple ends. It doesn't take a genius to realize that we're over 7 billion people today. We're going to be 10 billion people by 2050, and covering the world in cows to feed 10 billion people just doesn't work. Asia consumes close to 50% of all the world's meat. It's the fastest growing region for meat consumption.
The region's pursuit of meaty pleasures is projected to increase to 33% by 2030. According to an outlook done by the Food and Agriculture Organization, Asia is expected to account for 56% of global meat imports by 2028.
Well, you can do the math. We're going to be very, very dependent on import if we don't change the way that we consume our proteins.
But things weren't always like this. Back in the 1960s, meals weren't centered around meat, but rather vegetables.
Here in Asia, many cultures are very accustomed to plant-based cuisines. The very first vegetarian records coming from ancient India, 8th century before Common Era. If you look at the Chinese culture, for example, it goes also back for thousands of years.
But back in the 1980s in the UK, plant-based foods is just about to make a debut. Quorn, pioneer in plant-based foods, took 20 years to perfect their recipe. To capture the meat-loving UK market, the first Quorn products took a spin on Britain's beloved pie in 1985.
Having a product where the consumer could actually compare, that would be crucial. It was really like the novelty. We have been able for the first time to replicate meat, and it really started to attract a lot of consumer interest.
Quorn's pie was a clever product at the time in the 80s because it was all about vegetarian. It was a very niche market, so they had to broaden their appeal, and the pie was obviously in the UK a fairly well-known product. However, there were certain prejudices where your protein intake wouldn't kind of be sufficient anymore because you cut out meat, which always has been seen as the main source for protein. So I think they have faced much of that prejudice.
Quorn countered this protein myth by fusing their plucky British origins with the messaging of their nutritious value. And who better than UK's football legend Ryan Giggs to deliver that message?
Quorn burgers are a tasty alternative to meat and very healthy.
It's a win for both, I would say. Champion with champion.
Armed with partnerships, sales rocketed between 1994 and 2000. They injected the profits into a new fermenter and food processing facility, which allowed them to scale, breaking into 9 European markets by the turn of the millennium. The next frontier? The US of A in 2002. But it would only be 8 years later that the food industry would see a strong plant-based player. In 2010, Impossible Foods was born.
Hi, I'm Pat Brown, CEO and founder of Impossible Foods, a company with a simple mission: to completely replace the use of animals as a food production technology by 2035.
I think many very successful companies have very bold and big missions. It helps to align all the employees, believing that they are actually working not only for profitable business, they're working for a cause. It signals to the people out there that they are up for a mission and for a cause that people can join, and that's why timing is so crucial.
The genesis of Impossible started on the heels of the swine flu pandemic, H1N1. As pork prices soared, the world was a little more woke to the vulnerability of the meat industry. The Impossible team needed to find a solution fast.
We realize in food, consumption and patterns and trends start with the consumer. So the only thing that's really going to drive that infrastructure to change is make products that'll make it really easy for consumers to make that choice.
So Impossible had to science a product that outperforms meat on every level. No pressure. They decided that since the beef industry is the biggest polluter, it would be their main competition. The weapon of choice? A burger, reinventing the timeless American classic.
To be successful launching also something in the plant-based market is make it look like something that is comfortable and familiar. So any innovation, you can look into design, you can look into food, or technology, doesn't matter. It has to have an element of familiarity.
Let's rewind to find out why this perfect marriage between patty and bun became such a nostalgic icon. America needs to thank White Castle, the first ever burger chain in 1921. With its stately white walls, the fast food chain elevated burgers from working-class junk food to a food for everybody. Burger joints began popping up in droves, and by 1940, it became the quintessential American meal. Propelled by the rise of pop culture and fast food chains, the burger became a quick worldwide phenomenon. With burgers so entrenched in diets globally, Impossible knew that this was the way to go. But they weren't just targeting any type of customer.
Our target of the meat lover was a very conscious decision from day one in the company. And the only way you can change that ecosystem to be in a more sustainable earth is to convert meat consumption over to plant-based consumption. And I think with burgers, it's meat forward, it's culturally iconic.
For the product to appeal to the masses, the pioneering team needed to dive into meat at a molecular level.
For the first several years of the company, it was all basic science to understand what actually makes meat, fish, and dairy foods so absolutely delicious. And we realized that when you actually start breaking down meat flavor, meat aroma, it is very complex. There's all kinds of chemistry that happens as you're cooking. The simplicity that our team found is as you look at that cooking process, almost all that chemistry that happens when you cook for flavor and aroma is driven around heme.
Key to that blend of novel and nostalgia, this little magic compound, heme. It's an essential molecule found abundantly in every living animal, but also in plants. To extract heme, one way would be to take it from the roots of legumes directly. Impossible's extraction of heme is to take the DNA from these legumes and insert it into a genetically engineered yeast. They then ferment this yeast, very similar to the way Belgian beer is made, to produce heme. The result? A patty that looks like the real thing.
When you look at innovation from a psychological angle, people buy into innovation on the basis of seeing something familiar and seeing something new. I think that's where Impossible did a really good job, because the familiarity of the look, the feel, the smell of the meat-like kind of appearance, together with actually it's only a plant-based, it's completely new. And I think it's the right mixture.
With a finished product, it's time for the team to face their plant-based anxieties and serve it to the American public. The 1980s, the first Macintosh was born.
I'd like to show you Macintosh in person.
NASA's first space shuttle was built, and in the UK, Quorn was taking off.
Crunchy fillets. They're low in fat and cholesterol-free.
Then this happened.
All of the factors that led to the emergence of mad cow disease are present in the United States.
Results confirmed the presence of BSE in this animal. A sample was taken and the carcass was incinerated.
The panic about this favorite protein drove hordes to look for healthier, disease-free options. With bigger production facilities, Quorn rolled out all across Central Europe, providing ready-to-cook food favorites. Sales climbed rapidly between 1994 through to the turn of the millennium. With a stronghold in Europe, Quorn decided to expand their reach.
This is what Quorn represented when we decided to go abroad. Our belief that we can have a much bigger impact because the same elements of personal health and planet are present around the world. That it was not just a UK story.
There's always discussed the first mover advantage, which is always great to be the first in the market and building the knowledge and all about it. But it also has its flip side, because when they launched, obviously they were challenged then by the establishment, by the meat industry and others, whether the ingredients would be all right, whether it would be actually a healthy product. And that really backfired on them very, very big.
Just after Quorn launched in the States, it faced a mushrooming controversy. In order for the product to feel familiar, Quorn decided to label mycoprotein, a form of fungi, under the mushroom family.
Quorn's active ingredient amounts to mycoprotein, but that's triggered charges of deceptive marketing. The Center for Science and the Public Interest defines mycoprotein as a fungus or a mold that's grown in a vat, so it worries about allergic reactions.
This play on truth backfired. It was revealed that mycoprotein was actually a form of mold, which for some could cause an allergic reaction. The Center for Science and the Public Interest in America collected more than 1,000 adverse reaction reports since 2002.
So it takes a long way to kind of rebuild that trust again, to say that's actually not true, and we have to put our own R&D in to actually prove that case. Can you sustain yourself long enough to actually make that happen?
Education is extremely important. When you eat bread, you never call that is a yeast food, maybe. You just call it as a bread. In some market, people see fungus as a bad thing. But I always tell people there's a good bacteria as a bad bacteria. There is a good fungus and there is a bad fungus.
While there was a setback, numerous research papers were published supporting the nutritious value of corn. The natural fungi is high in protein and fiber, has zero cholesterol and sugar, and low in fat. Quorn engaged Mo Farah, most successful British track athlete in modern Olympic Games, to endorse the product.
People say, what's your secret? Practice, protein. Practice, protein.
Corn is also being served in hospitals because of its nutrition profile.
The amount of muscle mass that was rebuilt following exercise was actually higher through a corn diet than with the animal diet. This is really pushing the boundary of what can be done. It started all from health, but now we can see that some of the benefits are even taking corn into a bit of a higher space or a higher ground. That combined with the FDA acknowledgement that very quickly won us the right to play in such a challenging market like the American market.
Corn faced many obstacles in America, but Asia was a whole different ballgame. The term plant-based was not heard of. Vegetarianism was mostly associated with religion, and meat with status and wealth. Yet a little-known Singaporean brand would try to create the world's first vegan burger.
When I told my friends about the idea of VeganBurg, they definitely think it's crazy. The first question will be, is there any vegans in Singapore? The main obstacle is the lack of ingredients and resources. All the suppliers I speak to, they do not see a need to abstain egg and dairy from the bun and the patty because that's the main binding ingredient. So the R&D process was the main challenge. It's just very tough looking for the right partner to manufacture it.
Driven by his mission to provide a healthy fast food alternative, it took 8 years to perfect his recipe. It has remained small but strong with one outlet in Singapore.
You know, when I first started out with the idea of VeganBurg, and I was trying to put the concept across to influential leaders in Singapore, it was very tough. I realized that maybe the Singapore market is just not ready for a concept like this. We're just way ahead of the game.
Alex knew that if he wanted his burgers to take off, he'd need to make it in the land of burgers. He moved his family and sunk his money into a vacant lot in San Francisco in 2015. It would take 2 years of localizing the menu and working as a general manager of the store before VeganBurg was able to get the attention that it needed. Finally winning over the American palate in 2018, Alex clinched his first franchisee.
Within the first year, we were named the top 50 restaurant brands to look out for in the restaurant news. And within the second year of the operation, we were awarded the San Francisco Green Business Award. And the third year, we were so fortunate to have the top 100 movers and shakers in the restaurant industry. It's starting to be mainstream. So I think it's in the perfect timing. Today, there's many other similar concepts, which I believe got inspired by us as well.
Vying for the top spot in the same territory is Impossible Foods. They boldly targeted the wider meat-loving demographic and dreamed up a burger so deceptively similar to meat, they believed it could fool even the top of the food chain.
Culture in meat is really driven in the US by these like culturally iconic people in the major cities. And we went to the most stringent restaurants in the world for meat. So the first time we started meeting with chefs, we'd have tons of skepticism until they started cooking with it. And you could just see their minds opening up and like, wow, I can do this with it, I can try this. This is the first product from plants that chefs would put their name behind and say, this is meat made a better way, meat made from plants. And we really tapped into the meat culture that way.
This naturally made this the nouveau burger that the trend-seeking customer had to try.
Awareness is everything. Without awareness, you cannot do anything, especially for such an innovation in food and beverage. It's crucial to have people talk about it, but also raise the trust that this is actually something that's worth trying.
The first time I had Impossible in a restaurant, there was a table of 10, probably mid-20s consumers at the table next to us. Everybody had an Impossible burger. I don't think anybody at the table talked for 10 minutes. They just took their phones out, took pictures, started putting it on Instagram, started telling all their friends. And that's when you really knew that this was a cultural moment that was going to continue to spread. And I think it really puts the power in consumers to drive this global movement and drive a global environmental movement.
This level of marketing tapped on the wave of environmental consciousness that is sweeping millennials today. 2019 was defined by the likes of Greta Thunberg, a Swedish child environmental activist who sparked worldwide protests, encouraged a massive youth movement, and stood up to politicians for robbing the next generation of their futures.
So early on, we would do brand surveys of why people buy plant-based meats, and all the environmental metrics, better for the environment, lower pollution, lower water use, we're right at the bottom. And we've seen that conversation completely change. Now when we do our tracking, the number 3 purchase driver is the environmental statistics behind it. So we're seeing how important that is becoming to consumers.
The push to market came fast and strong, making Impossible a household name in only a short space of time. But their meteoric rise also alerted regulators. The Center of Food Safety were concerned about the deregulatory trend that was occurring, which prioritized corporate profit over public health and safety. The institution was concerned that there wasn't enough convincing evidence to prove that heme was safe for consumption.
The heme protein that's derived from genetically modified yeast as a production technology is something we put a lot of work to on the scientific side. One of our core principles that we'll always hold to as a company is that our products will be more nutritious than what we replace, and that's really important. We have lower fats than meat from a cow, and as we continue to innovate, our products will get even more and more nutritious.
Contrary to naysayers, based on Impossible's own studies and a later FDA approval in 2019, it is concluded that heme is safe for human consumption. Moreover, the cow is not getting any better. We've all read headlines of red meat and its links to cardiovascular diseases. And it's already caught up with us in Asia, with the region being the epicenter of cholesterol dangers. But these fears are still not deterring our demand for meat. Beef consumption in Asia is expected to grow by 2.7 million tons by 2030, the largest gain across any global region, according to the latest outlook released by the Food and Agriculture Organization. And while that is a lot of beef, that isn't even Asia's main meat staple. This is pork. Countries such as China, South Korea, Vietnam, and Taiwan all credit pork for at least half of total per capita meat consumption, according to the Euromonitor International. So how is the plant-based movement evolving to capture such an essential region? The year of 2020 had everyone screaming for a do-over. It was defined by the coronavirus outbreak, locking down cities, confining global populations, halting economies, disrupting supply chains.
You're going to pay more on your shopping trips for meat to the supermarkets and meat shops. The supply chain is having a hard time keeping up.
People are panicking. They don't think there's going to be enough meat.
Especially our meat supply chains.
We've definitely seen a rise in plant-based meat sales due to COVID-19. And we think it's mostly so because the animal agricultural sector has been affected quite badly because many of their workers fell sick, which led to the closure of factories and then a disrupted supply chain. Both farmed and caged wild animals are the perfect breeding ground for zoonotic diseases. They have heightened stress levels, they're packed together with way too many. unnatural diets, poor sanitation.
According to the WHO, there are 20 pandemics in history that have been cited to be passed from animal to human, also defined as zoonotic diseases. All came through the consumption of meat. Aware of the ticking time bomb is David Jung, founder of Green Monday. His company has been providing a pork alternative to over 8 countries since 2018, their latest debut being in Singapore. At the height of the pandemic, the company saw the sales of its product, dubbed OmniPork, surge by 120%.
A lot more people are awakening to the fact that animal agriculture truly is unsustainable, unsafe, and extremely broken. African swine fever, we're talking about hundreds of millions of pigs have died in the last 2 years, and still there's no sign of stopping. I hate to say this, but it takes something as dramatic as the pandemic to kind of wake people up.
But pulling away from pork is not going to be easy. Half of the world's pork is produced and consumed by Asia. But David believes his revolutionary ground pork has what it takes to make these cultural icons guilt-free.
What are the things that people crave most? We engaged a third-party agency to conduct a study, and luncheon meat ranked first in many regions within Asia. There's no secret that most luncheon meats have nitrate, which is carcinogenic, and then of course the sodium content is off the chart. So OmniPork luncheon is 60-something% lower in sodium, half the calorie, half the fats, at the same time high protein, high calcium content.
This revolutionary ground pork consists of a mixture of rice, peas, non-GMO soy, and shiitake mushroom. Beet extract is what's used to mimic the blood. And while their product checks all the plant-based boxes, it's staying true to its Asian target market that has allowed OmniPork to scale rapidly.
We clearly are Asia-based. Choosing pork was kind of a no-brainer. They can put it in fried rice, stir-fry noodles, turn it into a meatball, turn it into a patty, or whatever shape they like. The possibilities really are endless.
Plant-based players like David are part of a rapidly growing market. In Singapore, there's Shiok Meats that looks to produce lab-grown seafood. Alchemy Fiber or Seed Fuel, which provides a plant-based flour. Singapore also has big food tech aspirations, setting aside a $50 million investment to players who can produce proteins of the future.
We expect either Singapore or Japan to be the first country that actually regulates cultivated meat, which is going to be like a huge thing. So Singapore has the 30 by 30 program where they foresee production of food being produced here in Singapore in 2030 by 30%.
The East is growing rapidly. So how are Western counterparts looking to stay competitive? Quorn, pioneer in alternative proteins, believes localizing and diversifying will pay off. From when they first released their product in the 1980s, breaking into the US market in 2002, Quorn in 2015 decided that Asia was their next big bet.
This is a line of corn dim sum lines that we have. So you have the siomai, the puff, the bun, and the glutinous rice. How do we make this product suited to the local market? You need to know each of the different culture, religion, diversity that they have, and be able to adapt to the flavor and cuisines that they really want to do.
Since entering the market in 2015, they've now got a whole range aimed at Asian palate, from chicken rice to rendangs. Quorn also had another strategy to set itself apart, placing carbon labeling on their products.
Our ultimate goal, we want to take out less than what we put back as a positive impact on the planet.
It's not only being the first mover, you have to keep being the first mover all the time. And that puts a lot of pressure on the company. Stay very nimble and keep on listening and adapt to what the market is telling you. And it's going to be very interesting also to see how Impossible and others are moving forward in other Asian markets.
Meatless burger maker Impossible Foods has set its sights on winning over hearts, stomachs, and wallets of Asian meat eaters. They made their debut in Asia via the city of Hong Kong about just 18 months after launching in their home territory.
Most brands, especially food companies, they will spend years in their home market. We rushed to Asia, and that was very strategic. We're looking at where are the sort of lighthouses, the centers of influence and culture and food culture in the region. The initial cities that come to mind are definitely Hong Kong.
This bustling city is among the world's biggest meat consumers. An average Hong Konger tucks into 3 times more meat than the daily recommended amount. To disrupt Hong Kong's love affair with meat, Impossible needed to study the local palate.
We really want to show product market fit and culinary diversity and credibility. So really it was about, showing that Impossible works in not just Western cuisine, but it works as a mapo tofu. It works as a sijito. It works as a murtabak. It works as a dumpling.
Impossible introduced Asian-friendly products next to their burger offering. Partnering with high-end restaurant Beef and Liberty, the Impossible Burger quickly became its top 3 best-selling burgers. Having made their mark in Hong Kong, Singapore was next.
I spent a lot of time understanding the zeitgeist of the Singapore food scene. One thing that we wouldn't want to ignore is the hawker centers. That's the beating heart of the Singapore food culture right now. So we got in touch with the management team at Localizing, which is obviously probably like the grand dame of the hawker centers here in Singapore. And we brought in a couple of our guest chefs from Singapore and worked with a couple local hawkers. We had thousands of people turn up. There were definitely people in the queue that we asked, and they didn't even know what they were queuing for.
It took Impossible just 2 years to enter 3 markets in Asia, but it's yet to capture a crucial market. The country most hungry for meat, China. Fueled by a prosperous middle class, meat consumption grew almost 7-fold over the last 3 decades. While pork is the main choice of protein, beef consumption is growing rapidly.
When we look at our strategy overall for Asia Pacific, China is the very obvious elephant in the room. We really can't succeed as a company and with our mission without China.
I can only hope that they will have different strategies entering mainland China. I think it's a much bigger challenge to find the right strategy. It's a market where it's very culturally very different to anything else in the world. So it's a tough market to crack.
Clearly, one does not simply enter the Chinese market. Just take a look at Western tech giants like eBay, Amazon, Uber, and Walmart all failed to successfully capture the local audience.
It is important to have local partners. We are not going to pretend that we know everything. That's just humanly not possible. It does require the change in formula, not just labeling, not just packaging, but formula.
China is also known to have huge beef with a particular process the Impossible patty greatly relies on: genetic modification. A nationwide survey conducted in China found that 46.7% of respondents had negative views of GMO. But it's only through these means that Impossible is able to conceive of 2 ingredients crucial to the burger: heme and soy protein.
There's been some skepticism and concern on GM products. And the way we've tackled this is we have to be very transparent. And so the first thing we need to do is educate. Every time we're going into new markets with our product, we take every opportunity we can to educate and demystify what Impossible is.
Chinese customers got their first taste of Impossible's localized offerings, debuting 50,000 samples at the China International Import Exposition in 2019. They roped in a master chef to serve up their meats in the form of siu mai. But hold up. Any savvy Asian would know that siu mai is made with pork, and that's exactly Impossible's strategy to capture the Asian market.
I lived in China for nearly 5 years, and it's been said, you can measure the health of the Chinese economy by the price of a pound of pork. So for China and for Asia in general, pork is critical. We had to make product more robust, more versatile. We're still very early in our business. I would say a lot of the challenges that we're going to have, we don't know it, and that's a good thing. And as long as we look at this as a learning opportunity in every step that we go through, then really build the ecosystem that we need to drive success.
For Impossible's China dreams, it's still early days. The plant-based meat wars are already taking off in China, with big players like Beyond, OmniPork having entered the market, and Gen Meat and Starfield are growing fast in the country. But judging from their track record, nothing seems too impossible for the team. And it's fueling a global shift towards greater plant-based innovations.
Can we replace? Can we give them a better product? Just like how electric vehicles, I mean, we're not asking people not to drive, we simply ask them, use this better version. This is the evolution of food.
For the next generations, for our children, we just need to create a better way of consuming meat, and we can definitely do that.
I have 3 kids that are now 23, 21, and a little daughter of 18. And when I started to talk to them about joining Quorn, their reaction was something I've never seen before. I'm gonna do everything I can to see in the eyes of my kids that they are proud of what they've achieved.
It's through the boldness of first movers like VeganBurg, which dared to dream, OmniPork, which played to their strengths, Quorn, which has learnt to reinvent, and most of all, those undeterred of the impossible, that we as a people can begin to have greater awareness of the state of our waistlines, the well-being of our environment, and our world.
Yeah, I mean, it's just established, so what's the next thing?
I like fried chicken thighs that make me feel so good. Stoking coals soothes my soul. I love my barbecue. Understand, I'm just a man with a pork fat.